We really should have this scored with the music. That would have added to it. Thanks everybody again for being here. We have about 30 minutes for questions, so we encourage you, do not wait. Head right over there to the microphone. We will make it incorporated as part of this conversation about that terrific film. I want to introduce our panel today. George Siougas, writer and director, joining us live from London. Very much appreciated, sir. Academy Award-winning composer, Stephen Warbeck. The star of the show, Jason Watkins. And executive producers, Rita Marcocci and Josh Friedman. Rita's Varus Studios, by the way, is Westport based, so very exciting. And it was such a terrific film. I have an admission. I have never sat through a film with no dialogue. I don't know how many of you have not, but I'm 47 and not embarrassed to say that, and yet I can't remember a film that made me feel more emotional. Kudos to all of you. That's remarkable and an achievement. And let's start with you, George. What kind of challenge is that to make people feel so emotional minus dialogue? And was that always the plan?
It wasn't a plan. It wasn't. First of all, can I say I've been so excited about this screening, and although I'm 3,000 miles away, I can really feel the Westport warmth coming from all of you. So thank you so much. And Dave Briggs, it's great to meet you. Thank you, Bill Harmer and Alex Giannini, for making us feel at home. It wasn't really a conscious decision from the start. The inspiration came from a 1921 illustration by a British artist called H.M. Bateman. And the illustration was called The One-Note Man. And I became aware of this illustration while listening to an Alfred Hitchcock interview. And he revealed that his inspiration for the single crash of cymbals and the man who knew too much came from this illustration. So that was great serendipity, because I'm a huge Hitchcock fan. There are no bubbles in the illustration. There's no dialogue in the illustration. It's just it just shows the routine, really, his daily routine, and that's about it. And so it wasn't a conscious decision, but perhaps unconsciously, the fact that this illustration had no dialogue in it guided me that way. It made me laugh right away, and I thought it was a really clean idea, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I kept thinking that if this character plays one note at work, then maybe he does so in his life too. And then that, I'm Greek, so the Greek word monotonous came into mind, which in Greek means a single tone, so one note. So maybe his life was monotonous too. And suddenly all these questions started forming about, and the metaphors, and why does he play one note? Why? What's happened to him? Is he sad? Is he happy? So that the idea of loss came into mind. So I guess the challenge is there. No matter what, if you make a film with dialogue, the challenge is still there to involve an audience emotionally. That is the goal always, and it's a challenge always, regardless. But I wanted to make a film to strip it from all the frills, including dialogue and fancy camera moves, and tell this very clean idea in the cleanest way possible, utilizing cinema's three most powerful tools: performance, image, and music. So as I was writing it, page 3 came up. I went to page 3 with no dialogue. Page 5, no dialogue. I realized pretty soon that I didn't need it. And the golden rule is if you can show it, don't say it, right, in cinema. So I guess it happened effortlessly.
It's remarkable in its achievement because my anxiety almost danced with the music. I don't know how many of you felt that way. The audience laughed, which is remarkable, and I'm sure I wasn't the only one that a tear welled up in my eye, again, with no dialogue. So, Stephen, could you speak to the challenge of bringing emotions to an audience like this and to around the world, quite frankly, without a word spoken, and how exciting was that opportunity?
There are two things that I'd say may be worth saying. One is that if you think of your day, most of us are not speaking all day, every day. I mean, I've just sat there quietly, which is difficult, for 25 minutes, but most of our day is not populated by speech. We clean our teeth, we do our various things, we go to work. So, in fact, that is a fairly normal experience. He's so much in his routine that that speech isn't necessary. But that I do feel that we're all very lucky in that there may be exceptions, but generally music speaks to every human being, and music has a sort of direct route to the heart. And we can all be moved and feel things with music without language. So music can unite us, and similarly, music can unite us with a lonely character. And the moment he sees the violinist start to play her solo, which he hasn't seen before because he's been in such a hurry to leave, the moment he sees that, and you feel the vibrato on her string as she plays that ascending phrase, you start to feel something of what the character, the one-note man, starts to feel. So we're really sharing an emotion, and repeating myself possibly, but it's a shortcut to leave out language, to leave out dialogue, because it is such we can't understand why music does it, how music does it. Is it the vibrations of music that goes straight to our heart? What is it? But music does go straight to something in all of us.
The music brought so much anticipation, and the facial expressions, Jason, were remarkable as well. So when they came to you, they say, "We've got a perfect film for you, you won't say a word." And what was your initial reaction?
Yeah, no lines to learn. That's great, isn't it? Yeah, well, it was so brilliantly written on the page. He's such an appealing character, and also, I think, I do speak, by the way, in case you're worried. But knowing that Stephen had done the music, actually, I think is important. I think, obviously, George is underplaying. You know, there's image, there is music, and there's performance. There's always also the director. So, I mean, he has to take a lot of credit for that. So, but yeah, the whole idea. I mean, just to that moment where I'm hearing, you know, the violinist for the first time, I'm kind of led by the music. My performance is led by the music. Because it's being played, obviously, while we're filming it. So all that music informs the way that one performs. And because there's no dialogue, then, you know, you're really working from the outside in. You know, the inside out. So you're trying to a bit of both. You're trying to make it real in each moment, which is what the actor's job is, and it's uncluttered by dialogue. So you're just trying to find each moment to be as real and truthful, but also from the outside in, you're responding to the music. So it's quite a heady and wonderful kind of hybrid that you're not necessarily get to do a lot. And so that was discovered really while we were making it, more so than actually reading it. But it's just a great character, isn't he? And he goes on this incredible journey, and so it was a joy having read it. Yeah.
Even the toothbrush becomes a central character in the film and makes you feel.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there's a little bit of sort of little habits like that we all have, and I suppose I have to hold my hand up that occasionally I've got one or two of those myself, not involving a toothbrush, but other things which I won't go into. But yeah, so all those little quirks I thought were very real and very endearing, and he was a guy that got into a rut in a way because of losing his wife probably, and that he'd satisfied himself with a quiet life, and then he was open to something magical that changed his life for him.
Definitely want to get into the message, but Rita and Josh, what drew you to this project, and what gives you such pride when you see the way audiences react to it, and awards as well?
I'm going to start, I guess.
Yes.
Well, first of all, the script drew me to it. Josh actually brought me the script, and when I read it, I immediately fell in love with it. It was just so beautiful and different, and took chances, and you know, Josh and I met randomly, and I do really believe the universe brought us together, because for us to all be together making this film was just such an honor to be a part of the team at Cusp Films, Michael and Luke, just an amazing team to work with, and obviously the talent of George is just, you saw it today. And as I said earlier, I'm just really proud to be a part of it. I'm really proud that it sounds like everyone here enjoyed it. And it just, it really spoke to me on the pages. And then as I was seeing it, as it was unfolding, they would send me the dailies and things like that. And I was just like, wow, this is much more than I even anticipated it to be. So as I said, I'm honored to be a part of this amazing team.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Well said. The people, obviously, in making, many people know this, that many people make up a movie, a TV show, and anything that an audience sees. A lot of those people happen to be wonderful in this production, and George and I are old souls, I think, and the romance and the idea of love and the idea that it takes something inside of you to make a change, to be inspired, and to have that tenacity to go about acquiring whatever you happen to be inspired by is all said here. It's in there, and George and the people here embraced that, I think, very quickly, saw it on the page, you can see it in George's eyes somehow, and perhaps our eyes too, but it's a wonderful message for all of us when things are a little gray. So I think that's the wonderful thing about the cinema.
Well said. I think we have a question over here.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, wow. And what a team. I was so taken away with this brilliant little jewel. In fact, I was shocked that there was no dialogue. Someone said there's no dialogue. And I asked my neighbor, did you know there was no dialogue? And he said, yeah. I didn't. I was so taken with it. And the scene when they were, I guess you were improvising with the music, or was that written? When you were improvising with the oboe and the violin? That was improvisation?
No, that was scripted. So it was scored chiefly, wasn't it, Steve?
But that's okay. It was still good.
Well, it seemed like it was improvised.
But you have actually, you are right in one way. It was scored, but the idea was the character was improvising.
It was wonderful. And when at the end of the symphony, the music and everyone, I just yelled out and started applauding as if I were there in the screen thing. I'm afraid I was very disruptive, and I apologize, and maybe laughing in the wrong places, but this piece has taken my breath away, and I feel like I'm still breathless, and I wish you so much luck with it. It's a winner in everybody's eyes, and thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much.
We'll meet you in the parking lot for your check. Thank you.
Do you have a question?
I do. My question is about the collaboration between the music and the script. I noticed, if a short film has a time limit, just by the structure of the category, so I'm curious about that. But you had to quickly bring us into his habits and then speed us up. And the music, I noticed the tempo really had to pick up as you shortened up his routine. So kind of what came first? Did you guys decide that on the fly? How would you do that? And how did the music, how did that collaboration take place and those decisions get made to help us feel the expediency of that time and not get bored maybe in the repetitiveness of his routine and move it along,
Well, George, is he still there? Yes. Yeah, there.
Right here.
George said, this sequence has got to speed up, like you said. It's got to get faster and faster. What I've never admitted before was, I said to George, it can't speed up that much. And part of the reason is I can't play the piano that fast. It gets to a certain point, you literally can't do it. His routine was shorter and shorter, and we sped up. But this whole film had to be planned in intricate detail right from the beginning. So everything was sort of laid out, and the speeding up music had to be part of that, and the whole thing had to be sewn together in a way that's more like an animation where you're hitting certain point, more like a cartoon or animation where you're hitting certain points. But now George knows the real reason why I wouldn't speed up anymore.
Oh, okay. Well, I look forward to watching you walk down the red carpet and get that Oscar and to say, I saw you here in Westport.
One more question,
Hi,
please.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for a ray of light in an otherwise gloomy day and time. I write haiku, and it reminded me very much of haiku in that it felt the story and the emotion was very distilled and condensed, so I love that. My question, though, is you look like you really knew your way around an oboe. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I don't play the oboe, so I tried to play the clarinet years ago and sort of failed when I was a sort of teenager. So I had some sort of, feel for it. But no, we had a guy called Matt came along who plays in London, young guy, and he taught me how to handle it, how to use it, and how to look as though I was playing it convincingly, which has obviously worked. So that's good.
Absolutely.
So he'll get another job. But then I have fallen in love with the instrument. So my luxury purchase of this year was to buy one. Wow. So they're about £22,000, the concert one, so I haven't got one of those. I think it's setting a bar too high for me. It's a lot less than that, can I say? I'm really enjoying it. One technical thing is that obviously if you're playing a flute or recorder, the high notes at the top and the low at the bottom, it's one tube. But with the oboe, with the bassoon, it bends the corner and goes back again. So half your left hand is playing high and then low. So it's kind of an interesting piece. But I have to say that, and Stephen said earlier on about, whether it's the vibration in the heart that brings out the emotion in music generally, but it certainly happens in this instrument. When you get the tone right, and each note requires a slightly different character in terms of breath. So it's not just playing the same amount of breath for each note. There's a different way. So it's complex. But when it vibrates in the low notes, it's an incredible instrument, and there's power and joy and all those things. So I'm very slowly working my way up to being able to play something. So hopefully, maybe in a year's time, I've got my eye on one piece of music that I want to be able to play.
Well, we look forward to it. Thank you again.
Yes, sir. Thanks. I love the film. I was emotionally touched by it. I just have a technical music question. Was the original piece, was it classical, more classical? And then the one that he improvised, is that more folk based, or?
The original piece, it was written for the film. So the idea was it had to be believable that a small orchestra in a small provincial town would play this every day for 15 years, which is kind of interesting. So George asked for something that kind of had life, that involved all those instruments, that had kind of joy and fun to it, but that, not that it hid its heart or it hid its emotion, but that you didn't have a kind of very, very warm, very passionate piece of music until the moment when the one-note man, Jason's character, sees this other approach. And George and I talked about it, and he said at that moment, I'd like it to be, I felt that it should be more like, how can you put it? More like Balkan music, or more sort of, not folk, but more kind of with that inflection, with more vibrato and more sliding between notes, and almost like a beautiful folk tune. So it starts like that, and that's what captures him. And then their bit, their semi-improvised, which is a written bit between them, had to sound like he's making a conversation. So George, who may be still behind me, asked me to write, "Will you join me?" So he goes, da-da-da-bum. And that's a question done with the music, which we don't necessarily get the words, but he's asking that question. And then he goes, "Please," which I had on one note. And George said, "No, you can't have please on one note. What are you talking about? It's got to be two notes." So he goes, "Please," like that. Oh, God, you think. And then there's a moment of you lay yourself bare in front, not literally, in front of somebody, and then they say yes. And so it is more folkloric from that point. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Please keep them coming. George, underneath all this, of course, is the message, and many people in this audience and around the world, and the man speaking right now, are facing crossroads in life between doing it, playing it safe, and going out on a limb. What do you want audiences to take away from this film?
Well, as this wonderful lady said, these are dark times. And I really wanted to let some light back in and make people feel good and feel a little happiness. I mean, I love fairy tales. I grew up on Disney and E.T. and Star Wars, and I really wanted to take the audience back to their childhood and put their pajamas on and sit around the fireplace, you know, cozy and Christmassy. And so I guess that was my goal, to just, you know, make people feel good and put a smile on their face and warm their hearts a bit.
Jason, the same question to you. What do you think the message of this film is?
I think the message is, I think the audience tell you what the message is, really. They just respond. So this is the first time I've seen it with an audience, so I've just seen it, you know, on my laptop and stuff. I've shown it to kids and stuff, and they've really responded incredibly enthusiastically, and it's a great introduction into music, I think, in many ways. And we're doing a thing next week in Wales, in Cardiff, where we're inviting lots of young people to get to know the instruments and play the film and get them in. So that I think the film can be used really well in that way. But the message, I suppose, is, you know, it's very much about love and connection, and making a connection when you feel brave enough to do it. If you feel a connection with someone, then get on with it, you know. I mean, yeah, and he's very bruised and hurt by life and beaten down, perhaps. And in his personal way, love has solved his life in many ways. It's given him a new lease of life and joy, and as an example of the way that human beings can come together and do better things and not be, you know, sent apart. So I think essentially it's a film about love, isn't it?
I thought it was, I mean, I think to each his own. To me, it was about taking chances and stepping out on a limb and breaking routine. But to his point, Stephen, watching the audience react to the film, the laughter, the emotion in the audience, how did that strike you?
Well, we were sitting, sadly, here, and normally if I'd had my way, I'd have been sitting at the back, and you sort of feel the audience more when you're in them or behind. So it was lovely, but I was slightly tied up in my own feeling, which must be affected by all of you, that I felt a bit more emotional than I'd expected. And I thought, oh my God, I'm not going to cry, am I? It's going to be really embarrassing in front of 200 people who I don't know. But luckily, I just held that at bay and didn't quite cry. But I just feel like we all built up in the first 12 minutes, whatever it is, real hope that something's going to change for that character. And you kind of want it to be better. You want his life to be better. And when you just see that maybe will happen, that's a real sort of, you let the floodgates of optimism open. And like everyone's been saying, that's a nice thing to feel at the moment, that there can be love, optimism, and hope.
Yeah, I watched the film alone and didn't feel nearly as emotional as I did here today, which I don't know if you others experienced that. Yes, Matt.
Well, to answer your question there, that's why films work, and we go to a theater to see them with other people rather than just being in your living room.
That's
Yes,
very true.
thank you.
Yes. Very true.
So my question, obviously this is an international film, and so I'm wondering, how did two Americans, and specifically a person from Westport, end up making a British film?
I guess I'll start, because that'll
Yeah, you start.
bleed into your... I'm formerly a Sony employee in Los Angeles, worked as a studio executive, and in my group, we made movies we still, make movies around the world. This sort of has become popular, the idea of local language movies, movies that touch audiences that are commercial leaning, that audiences in China, in Germany, in India, in Mexico want to see. And so one of those territories is the UK. They happen to speak English, certainly, but a little bit of a different kind of English than the US. And I was raised in Canada, in Toronto, and I've, since my experience in traveling around, always wanted to make more British things. I mean, I was saying this before, these, they're wonderfully humble and wonderfully talented individuals that want to tell stories that lift your spirit, and so do I. And so I've moved here about 2 years ago and continue to produce, and Rita and I happened to meet each other on the street corner very randomly. And Rita had a same twinkle that all of us standing here seem to have. And so George and I are making a movie. We're hopefully selling a movie soon. But we've been working on a movie prior to this experience. So George brought me the film, the short film, and I brought Rita in to help. And Cusp, Michael, and Luke, other producers, were glad to have us. And so it's been a wonderful experience, and so you have an international kind of movie as a result. That's correct.
Well, that is true. This is, because the music is universal. No, we don't need subtitles. But I just want to add one thing, is that, you know, we did meet randomly, and I had another project that I said, oh, Josh, can you look at this project? And then he knew I was like wanting to do things like this, and I'm fortunate that he brought it to me, and that was the beginning. And you know, I think George could probably speak to this better, but the film was shot in 5 days, and I think, George, you were shooting in March, and they just completed the film just in time for basically the Rhode Island International Film Festival, which was our first in and win. We won the grand prize there, which then qualified us for Oscars. So, you know, I just think the way this film continues to inspire people and have such amazing audience reaction, not just here in the United States, but globally as well, is just a true testament to, again, I think, sort of the universe working for all of us to bring us all together so that we could make this film. So that's what makes it so special as well. And I'm happy that Westport is a part of it.
Jason, I hope you get up to speed with that instrument before you win the Oscar. That'd be a terrific acceptance speech.
It would, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Floating that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah.
You're welcome. George, we spoke to the absence of dialogue. How does that actually open up audiences around the world? And to Rita's point, how universal is the language of music?
Well, it has no barriers, really. And as Rita correctly pointed out, we don't need subtitles because we have music, and music communicates to all cultures all over the world. And that's our language here. And we use music as our tool to communicate. And these characters use music to communicate in that climax. So it's totally international, and you can hear a piece of music from a composer from you know, any part of the world, and it can spark emotions in you and take you places, and that's what's so magical about music. And I'm a huge fan of music. I listen to music all the time. I love soundtracks. I think if I wasn't a director, I'd probably love to be a composer for films. So, yeah, I guess, you know, music in film is also incredibly important, or the absence of. you know, the director may put the tear in your eye, but the composer will cause it to drop. So, yeah.
Do we have a question? Go ahead.
I actually had two. First, I just want to say, like others have said, this gave me so much hope. It was a beautiful movie. I thought it was brilliant as a short. But in saying that, I have to ask, was it ever considered that you might do a feature, or is there any discussion of that? Now is my first question.
Well, you may be onto something there. Absolutely. So I'm working on the feature version of this short film called The One With Man. It's going to be...
With other people, obviously.
100...
Without us. No, he's not. There's a joke, my God. Yeah. I think.
It got awkward.
Awkward?
Please continue, George.
Yeah, so I am working on the feature version of The One Up Man, and it's always been my goal to do so. So watch this space.
Second question, if I can. I'm curious, you talked about filming for 5 days, but I know, because I have a director and a screenwriter in the family, that there's a lot more, sometimes even more behind a short than there is around a feature in terms of the amount of work that's done. So I'm curious, from start to finish, as when you were starting to write the script all the way to when you were done and submitting to the film festival, how long did that take?
Well, can I just say one thing, George?
The whole process, pre-production, production, post-production, took about 6 months. In total. The script was written very, very fast. I wrote the script in a day, but then I worked on it for, a year, on and off because of COVID. So that was, the script was conceived during COVID. So there was plenty of time to think about it and work on it, which I think helped a lot. But I would say that about 6 months from beginning to end.
And I'd just like to add that George was incredibly thorough in his preparation, so the movie was storyboarded, so everybody knew very well what the images were and how the story was going to be told, but there was flexible as well. There was an amount of flexibility. If something happened that could slightly tweak something and enrich it, then that was also the case. But we were saying last night, weren't we, how meticulous George had planned and carried out his plan, and yet left it flexible for magic, really, because there's no point in making it, there's no magic.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any questions for George? Anyone here on the panel? George, any questions for your panel?
What's the delicacy in Westport?
Good question, George.
Gold's Deli.
I'm a
Gold's
foodie.
Deli.
Yeah.
Rita, you want to take that one?
Variety?
We're all stumped.
Variety. I'm going to say variety.
We had a great meal last night, I would say, at Kawani in Westport.
One of our finest.
Yes.
Please join us for some kawani and a sake bomb if you can. That is a wonderful experience. Well, thank you so much, everyone, we do have a couple of other questions. Come on up. You can use mine.
Thank you. I live here in Westport, and you're talking about food, and I have a strange question. The movie was so meticulous, the just perfection and the tedium in the beginning. But the butter dish, what about the butter dish? Oh. It was a mess. It was a mess. Everything is so neat and tidy, and then there's this butter dish. And I thought, now, is this put here to give us a future look at our musician's life? And I was totally delighted.
I guess even a meticulous man is flawed.
It was by design?
That was my question. Was it by design? Or it just happened there?
It was not by design.
I think I was actually eating it. I was actually you scooping it up, and I think it was my fault because it is my fault. Sorry, George.
I think it's
because I wanted it to look as though he'd been eating.
Yeah. I think, yeah, that's what happens when you shoot a 20-minute film in 5 days.
Well, we all wish you every global success. Amazing film. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just to follow up on the meticulousness of the film, could you talk about the editing process, who edited it, and how that matched up with your storyboarded film?
Yeah, sure. Well, the meticulous nature, first of all, thank you for your so kind comments. I really appreciate it. The meticulous nature of the film really stems from the character. I believe a film should be constructed from the inside out and not the other way around. So I don't think a director should go, oh, I'm going to make a film and I'm going to shoot it handheld. And it needs to stem from the inside out, so from the character himself. That's why the film is meticulous and precise, and the framing is what it is, and the editing is what it is. So it was designed that way because it made sense for it to be that way. So the editor was Russell Beaton, and I've worked with Russell before on a BBC drama called Casualty. It's a medical drama, and he's a wonderful editor. It was a really laborious process. The film was a really intricate puzzle, both to shoot and to put together. It's very bitsy in ways that I'd never experienced before in another film. That's what made it a great challenge for me also. And also why it had to be so carefully planned, because I didn't want the repetition. I didn't want to just repeat shots. I wanted each repetition to be a different shot, different lens. Why? Because as the montage, someone pointed out, as the montage quickens, you have less film, less time to tell the same story. Therefore, everything becomes faster, the music, as Stephen pointed out, but also the performance. So if you notice, Jason runs out of the theater in montage 4 and walks out of the theater in montage 1. Now, that may not make sense logically, but it does make sense when you watch the film as the pace increases. So it was a really particular film to put together, and quite difficult to get perfect. But also interesting and challenging, and a marvelous experience for me.
Meticulous is a great word. There's not a moment, not a beat, not a second wasted. Do you have one last question, or?
I may.
One last one.
All right,
I have some.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity, because I'd really like to give a shout out to the person who did the animation at the end of the film. I thought that was really brilliant and spot on. It was great. And also, can you tell me who the cartoonist was that inspired, in part, this idea? Because in the beginning of the credits, it says something about inspired by cartoon, and I couldn't read the rest. I'm interested, I'm curious.
Yeah, so that inspired by is just the mention of the H.M. Bateman illustration, which I mentioned at the start. So that's what that credit is about. But thank you for noticing the end credits, because I didn't want the story to just end at that iris out, which is such a Chaplin-esque sort of way to end a silent film. That's a homage to Chaplin. I didn't want the film to just end there. I wanted the audience to keep experiencing the characters, and the inspiration for that was Pink Panther, and titles by Fritz Furlong, in which, in the beginning of the film, you see the characters in the movie in cartoon form, and it just sets the tone so right. So I guess that was my little nod to that great artist.
It was great. And did you do the storyboard also on that? All those little
Yes,
snippets?
so I drew the
Great.
characters with my little terrible stick figures, and drew the characters and did all the cells, all the storyboards, as I do. And then Ed Swales, our marvelous storyboard artist, who's way more talented than me, brought them to life. And then I took them to the cartoonists in Argentina, great company in Argentina. And they animated and created the world and the environment.
A perfect
And
touch.
it had to be a very finite. We knew that it would be a minute long because Stephen needed to write the music way before the actual titles were completed. So 1 minute was what we had for that.
It was great. Thank you again so much.
Thank you all for your questions. Josh?
Jason, quick question. How does your role in preparing for this role, how did it compare to your role in The Crown, playing a former prime minister?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because there is a real difference between the two approaches. And as you can imagine, no, one's a real person and there's an amount of impersonation, and finding the detail of that and making sure that's accurate. Also finding his heart as well, that character's, Harold Wilson's heart, and what his ambitions were, the way he saw the world, all the sort of fundamental things which fired him and inspired him. So there was that way, and the discipline of how he moved and all those things. And lots of research, which I really enjoyed. The academic part of it I enjoyed. And then the playing of it, like all things, you do lots of homework and then you just sort of give yourself up, I think, and just listen to everybody else. So on the set, so if you've got Olivia Colman talking to you, then that's quite inspiring. So, there's a way of trying to forget the research, and as I said earlier, to find the moment and make the moment as real as possible. So the same thing applies with The One Note Man, was that there's no dialogue, obviously, and that was interesting in itself. You didn't want it to become a mime show. You wanted it to be real and how we would be without words. And it's about thoughts, isn't it? And it's how we think. But I wanted him to be transparent. I think that was one thing. Harold Wilson was perhaps quite guarded, and his physicality was that he kind of was defensive. And whereas I think our guy, although he's living a very ordered and controlled life, I wanted him to be transparent so that you could read his expressions very clearly, because I think that would sort of carry the emotion and be me be a conduit really for the music. So hoping that the music, because it is music-led as a piece, I think that would drive into the character and would be seen on the other side by the audience. So, and I did, there's Charlie Chaplin I kind of, watched a bit, and Jacques Tati, French, who has a rain mat very much like our man. So, and I did lots of clowning when I was younger, when my body was a bit more able, and I relished all that. So that was a real joy, knowing that there'll be no lines to learn, nothing to remember other than creating stuff in the moment. And the last thing I'd add is that just about your instinct, all the things that we watch. Josh was saying that, you were brought up in Canada where you got a great influence from American humor and a lot of British humor because of that aspect of the country. So a lot of it is instinct. So in a way, you just try and go with your instinct and leave yourself alone, not think too much about it, and find the comedy that way. So that I really enjoyed that, sometimes too much. So George had to rein me in occasionally. But it was an absolute joy to make, and I do hope we go on and do more in this way.
And just one more question for Stephen. I'm gushing up here, so there's Stephen. What was harder, composing The One Note Man, or Shakespeare in Love, or Billy Elliot? Can you rank them?
Very, very, very briefly. Shakespeare in Love was hard because there was a lot of it, and also about the night before the recording, I watched it without the music and thought, this film's way better without music. So I was kind of assailed by doubts, as most human beings are. On Billy Elliot, I just made a terrible mistake. I said to Stephen Daldry, the director, oh, we don't need to record the dance music before. You just do the dances, and I'll put the music on after. But you can't, well, we did do it, but it's like every bar is a different length, and suddenly he kicks, and the choreographer's in the cutting room saying, you've got to mark the kick. And I said, yes, but it's on the 2.5 beat. I can't put an accent there. So that was a mistake. So the one-note man was the easiest because George told me how to do it. He said, I want you to do this, and then that little pause is going to be 6.5 seconds, and then when he looks at her, it's 2.5. So it's like I moved into a building that was already put up, whereas the others I had to build the building, and I built it a bit crooked.
Well, thank you all for coming out on a gloomy, gloomy, nasty Sunday. Thank you to Rita and Josh and Stephen and Jason and George for brightening our Sunday and bringing the world a remarkable film.